Some betrayals don't come with shouting or slammed doors. Some arrive quietly, disguised as a suitcase packed for a business trip, while the person who raised your husband takes his final breath alone. My name is Mira. I was 31, married for 6 years to a man named Arjun, a man I once thought was gentle, loyal, and family first. We had a small apartment full of framed photos, a dog named Bruno, and a life that looked, from the outside, perfect in every way. I believed in that picture completely. Arjun's father, Vikram, had been battling heart failure for months. He was a quiet man, the kind who never asked for help, even when his hands shook too much to hold a cup of tea. Every time I suggested we visit more, Arjun would say the same thing. "He's stable, Mira. The doctors said there's time." I trusted him. I always trusted him. That was the problem. I mistook blind trust for love. Then, one evening, Vikram's nurse called. Her voice was calm but urgent. "It could be tonight," she said. "If your husband wants to say goodbye, he should come now." I called Arjun immediately, my hands trembling. I expected him to drop everything. Instead, there was a long pause on the phone. "Mira, I have a flight to Singapore in 3 hours. It's a huge deal for my company. I can't cancel this." I stood frozen in our kitchen, staring at the wall, unable to understand the words I had just heard. "Arjun, your father is dying." "He's been dying for months," he said flatly. "I'll visit as soon as I'm back." Something inside me went cold, and still in that moment not sadness yet, just disbelief settling like fog over everything I thought I knew about him. I didn't argue with him. I simply grabbed my coat and drove to the hospital alone, leaving him to make his choice. But what I didn't know that night was that this business trip would unravel a secret far darker than a missed goodbye, and it would change everything I believed about the man I married. I sat beside Vikram that night, holding his weathered hand, listening to his breathing grow softer with each passing hour. He looked at me, his eyes tired but searching. "Where is my son?" I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. So I lied gently. "He's on his way, Baba. There was a delay with his flight." Vikram gave a small, knowing smile, as if he understood far more than I wanted him to. He passed away just before midnight, with only me and a night nurse by his side, holding his hand as the monitors fell silent. When I called Arjun to tell him his father was gone, his voice cracked on the phone, but something about it felt hollow. Rehearsed, like grief performed, rather than grief felt. He flew back 2 days later, dressed in black, playing the role of the devastated son perfectly for every relative who offered condolences. He was so close to his father, people whispered, "It's tragic he couldn't make it in time." I said nothing. I simply watched him accept sympathy for a loss he hadn't been present for, and something inside me shifted permanently. I stopped seeing my husband. I started seeing a stranger wearing a familiar face. Weeks later, while helping settle Vikram's belongings, I found his old phone charger tangled with Arjun's travel bag, the same bag he'd taken to Singapore. Curiosity turned into suspicion, and suspicion turned into a search I never expected to make. I found the real itinerary buried in his email. There was no business conference. There was a resort booking for 2. A woman named Priya, a colleague from his office, had traveled with him that entire week. The man who claimed he couldn't leave an important deal had abandoned his dying father to spend a week with another woman on a beach 3,000 miles away. I sat on the floor that night with the phone in my hands, and for the first time since Vikram's passing. I didn't cry. I felt something sharper than sadness, a quiet, burning clarity. I knew, in that moment, exactly what I needed to do. Not out of anger, out of loyalty to a man who deserved so much better than the lie his son had told him. I didn't confront Arjun immediately. Instead, I gathered everything quietly: the hotel confirmation, the flight records, messages between him and Priya that spanned months, not days. I wasn't building a scene. I was building the truth. The opportunity came during the family gathering to divide Vikram's belongings, surrounded by relatives who had spent weeks calling Arjun such a devoted son. I waited until everyone had settled, then placed a folder on the table. "Before we continue," I said, my voice steady and calm, "everyone deserves to know where Arjun really was the night his father passed." The room fell silent. Arjun's face drained of color as his aunt picked up the printed messages, her hands trembling as she read them aloud. Priya's name. The resort, the dates that lined up exactly with Vikram's final hours. Arjun tried to explain, his voice rising in panic, calling it a misunderstanding, a work trip that got complicated. But truth, once exposed, doesn't bend to convenient explanations. His mother, still in mourning, looked at him with an expression more painful than anger, quiet disappointment. "Your father waited for you," she said softly, "and you weren't even really gone for work." That sentence broke him more than anything I could have said. We separated within months. Arjun lost more than our marriage that day. He lost the respect of a family that once adored him, and any chance of making peace with the father he had failed in his final hours. As for me, I grieved Vikram as though he had been my own father, because, in many ways, through his quiet strength, he had been. I kept his old pocket watch on my nightstand, not as a symbol of pain, but as a reminder that presence matters more than promises. What I learned through all of this is simple. Truth doesn't need anger to be powerful. Sometimes it only needs to be placed gently in front of the people who deserve to see it clearly. Betrayal can shatter you, but it can also reveal the strength you never knew you had. And in the quiet after the storm, I finally found peace.